For that video going live, Nasty, and pause it straight away. So we are live now. Let me get everything set up on my end. Yep. Right, paused on my end. I think we are live. Right, there we go. Okay, so guys, we're back with Nasty, obviously living legend and great guest of the channel. But yeah, Nasty, how are things going before the questions coming in? What's been happening since our last talk on your amazing ejection story?
Well, great stuff, Mike, and it's great to be here again. Love watching the posts and everything going on with your audience and, you know, the interactions on stuff. So yeah, it's just been great, and continue to, you know, get out there and talk about leadership and flying and, you know, different venues and talking to different people. So it's just been awesome.
Brilliant stuff. And obviously we got your book in the corner there, Lead to Win. So can you tell us a bit about the book in case people haven't heard of the book or yourself?
Yeah, thanks. So Learn How to Lead to Win. I got a copy right here too. It's 33 stories that I felt were you know, representative of the times that I learned in the you know, in the Navy. And so it stretches from when I first, you know, wanted to go to the U.S. Naval Academy in the 8th grade and goes all the way through until I retired from the Navy 36 years later. It's 33 flying stories, sailing ship stories, and each one has a leadership lesson tied to it. So even if you're not a naval officer, you know, even a U.S. person or an adult even, you know, we tailor the audience to anybody who's leading, or if somebody thinks that a young person needs to be mentored, there's going to be something in that book for them.
Brilliant stuff. And all the links in the description below. As you can see, there's some questions coming in, but I want to ask you one question here, Nasty, which I don't think I brought up in our initial interview. You know, the chin pod on the F-14, what was the difference from the A to the D?
Very good. So the A has only a TCS, a television camera system, right? And so the television camera system, if you look on the A chin, it's glass. It's a flat glass, you know, kind of piece, and then that's the on the A. What the D featured was an infrared search and track, an IRST, and that dome is actually on the right hand side as you actually look at the front of the Tomcats on the left hand side, and it is a domed dark glass. And so the way you tell a D from the front or the side or anywhere you can see the nose is the D has the double sensors right underneath the chin, where the A only has the TCS. Actually, the B only has the TCS, television camera system. And so when you look at a B, you go, well, is that an A or a B from the front? You cannot tell. But from the side, where you can see the burner cans of the F-110 engines on the side, and if it has an angle or you get a chance to do a 360 degree, if it has the burner cans of an F-110, which are different than the turkey feathers of a TF-30 Pratt & Whitney engine, and it has a single TCS, that's a B. If it has the burner cans of the F-110s, the GE engines, and the dual, that's a D, and that's how you tell on the outside.
Brilliant stuff. As you can see there, there's questions coming in. If you can remember to scroll up and down there, Nasty, so start from the top. But yeah, guys, get your questions coming in, and this is going to be a great Q&A. So Nasty, I'm going to let you loose.
Yeah, pretty cool. So Mike L., yes, you get the first question. I guess you beat the electronics. And he asked, Helen asked you, Captain Nimitz, you ever have the French cross-tech to your ship? Who waves foreign aircraft? Is a CAG LSO qualified to wave the Rafale? So, yes, we did. When I was actually the Striker Commander on the USS Enterprise 2012 to 2013, we did a cross-deck with the Charles de Gaulle. And the Rafales came over, and they actually did touch and goes for us. What they've done recently with some of the newer connections is they've actually got to stop on the U.S. carrier. The E-2 Hawkeye is common to both air forces. So the E-2, the U.S. E-2, would trap on the French carrier, and that would do pretty good. The LSOs on each ship wave every airplane. So I've waved Rafales as a CAG LSO on USS Abraham Lincoln going around. Actually, there were Super Auton Dards is what I waved. And then when they brought the Rafales over during the during the Strike Group Commander trip in 2012, 2013, the LSOs, the CAG LSOs, waived the Rafale. So French LSOs waive any airplane landing aboard their ship because they're the ones that know their ship. And then they're assisted by people that know the airplane, but the wave is depending on who the ship is. So great question. CAG LSOs are authorized and trained to wave any airplane, anytime, anywhere on that particular ship. David Smith says, I know you talk about this in your book, compare and contrast the challenge of landing a Tomcat at night in bad weather versus the challenge of bringing together an entire CV strike group. Well, that's easy. Landing a Tomcat at night in bad weather or in any weather, that challenge is just me, okay? Bringing together an entire CV strike group, now I'm working with peers. I'm working with other thoroughbreds. I'm working with other leaders. And so now it's more of an influence task or operation than it is, mechanical hand skills. I suppose a great metaphor would be, how are you a great football player, and you can pick any football you want, and then you can compare and contrast that with being the coach of a team where you're trying to, bring that same level of challenge. What I found to be a neat challenge is I was able to bring a Tomcat at night and in all weather conditions aboard, and equally capable of bringing a strike group together from a leadership perspective. Nasty Mad Dog, sup, bro? Okay, yeah, having a good time here. Timberwolf says a tornado pilot was on here. He told of a bogey that 90-degree turned at the speed on a penny. These are in the news and concern the Pentagon these days. Have you or others seen strange? The UFO thing. Yeah, I've never seen UFO. Anything that I could not explain, but I did watch the video that was shown, and I listened to the congressional testimony. Dave Fravor, the lead Super Hornet guy, I know him extremely well. He's a very, very, very good pilot. And when I was watching that HUD video, he's got something on there that causes the radar and the infrared system to track it. So. Kind of interesting stuff. Based on, I've never seen anything different than you guys have seen, but I've heard things like that. They called it the Tic Tac. Apparently, that Tic Tac went from sea level to 60,000 feet in like the snap of an eye, and I don't know either what that is. So who knows? But I can't really ask your question there, or answer the question on those kind of strange things. Adam Cotton says, hey, Nasty, can you explain to me the principal difference between a fourth generation and fifth generation jet? Okay, the terms fourth, and actually started out first, second, third, fourth, and fifth generation. And now anything after fifth, when you start talking about technology, is turning into sixth generation. It's a relative term. So when I was flying a Tomcat and flying in Top Gun, and we learned how to fight different classes of bogies, we put them in generations. So a first generation airplane at the time when I was flying a Tomcat, which was third generation, relatively. So advanced, think about Tomcat technology. First generation was an airplane that was relatively slow but could turn really well. So in the U.S. inventory, the A4 Skyhawk was the bogey replicator, and an airplane, the MiG-17, was a first generation threat that we trained against. Second generation went really fast. And turned about like we did, kind of thing. So MiG-23 was a second generation airplane, and we fought Phantoms at the time. So a Phantom was a good second generation airplane for us to fight against. And then third generation, think MiG-21. Now, kind of the same as us. So a Tomcat and a MiG-21, and then the replicator was an F-5. And so like a MiG-21, the F-5 could disappear in a heartbeat, especially when they come nose on. So fourth generation now is beyond Tomcat as a fighter, and you've got the F-18. So the technology in the F-18. So generally digital technology, generally fly-by-wire, those kind of things, and sensors that can kind of reach out and fuse together the information in there. Now, fifth generation starts to bring in, radar and infrared stealth. And that's where fifth generation, it starts to be like a stealth jet. So the F-117 was out there before. It had stealth technology, couldn't turn very well, and was relatively slow. So the F-117 was kind of a stealthy fifth generation jet, but the other aspects of it made it an extraordinarily good bomber, but it's generally left out of the generational call. So fifth generation generally is the stealth stuff. Mike L, jet qualification, too old to fly in the military, best options to contribute in some way. Draken, sure. I mean, in my military, in the U.S. military, I don't know where you're asking about, you have to start training at age 27. When you're past 27, you can't train in the U.S. military. But if you want to fly and, enter national service or national security by being an adversary or something like that, then yeah, that's probably a good idea. Vic Sani says, do you see dedicated ASW aircraft returning to CBWs, perhaps a V-22? Lots of missions proposed for the V-22 out there. It's got wonderful potential to do that. Right now, I think for CVs, American CVWs, I think we do ASW primarily with a helicopter and with the destroyers, and then they're supported by the P-8 aircraft. I do not see and have not heard of any specific ASW mission aircraft being brought into the air wing. The missions for the future are more focused on counter-air, even though the submarine, I think, remains the greatest threat to the carrier and the carrier strike group surface ships. But I think you're going to find the helicopters continue to do that along with the destroyers, and then the P-8s are supporting them. Pretty capable stuff. Biggles, would you have preferred to have had the F-14 Super Tomcat rather than the F-18? Well, technology tends to go beyond what you currently have. Me, I love the Tomcat D model with the Lantern pod, best bomber. I think you could have done things to the Tomcat to make it, continue to be a viable airplane. Me personally, I want both. I want a Tomcat. And I've previously been on this show with Mike and told people, a Tomcat's like a mid-year Chevy Corvette, like a 67 Corvette, goes fast, sexy, loud. Everybody loves things, doesn't turn really well. And then the F-18 was like a brand new 2023 911 Porsche, all computer, digital, turns on a dime. And so you want to have both. I did value the capabilities of the Tomcat, and I think with, make it even more digital than it was, you could make that a pretty good airplane. But both have their value. Chris V, do you have a favorite flight in the Tomcat? Well, I have a favorite type of flight in a Tomcat, and that's when I just get to go out and do, maneuvers over the ship. And then come back in and get, go supersonic by the ship, and then come in and get a bunch of arrestments, so bagging traps in the Tomcat. But I just love flying that airplane. I've got a whole bunch of green ink in my logbook, being over southern Iraq and being able to do supersonic passes by the carrier and kind of giggling the whole time, and then doing that. So I just had a great time on that one. If I was going to tell you where a culminating flight was, September 5th of 1998, that was my last flight in a Tomcat, and it was airborne change of command, supersonic pass. I had flares coming out. You might have seen images of that. We dumped 60 flares, went by the carrier at about 1.3 Mach, completely overstressed the jet pulling up, and then came back in, broke at the stern, overstressed it then too, and then landed, and pretty fun. So. I was kind of exceeding what I was supposed to be doing, but I was the outgoing CO, and there was no excuse. But anyway, that was probably fun. El Knock, who was the most talented Tomcat pilot you had the opportunity to fly with? I'm going to take a line from Deion Sanders primetime from his interview on 60 Minutes this last Sunday. He's the new coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, and they asked him who's the best coach that you know, and he looks around and he goes, somebody get me a mirror so I can look at him. So you want to ask me who the most talented Tomcat pilot is? It's me. And the opportunity to fly with, I had a whole bunch. I had a whole bunch. Snort Snodgrass on the East Coast was epically famous, God rest his soul, in the Tomcat. And there were Top Gun F-14 guys, Streak Chanik, Bad Bob McCord, that were just famous, and they were role models of mine. Bob Willard, Rat, the bogey airplane guy in the first Top Gun movie, and the huge F-14 pilot, and then later a 4-star admiral after he had nuke power command. So there's a lot of them out there, but I cracked up when you asked that question. I said, give me a mirror. Let's see, what's the next one here? Did you chase an F-22 with AT FLIR and an F-14D or an F-18? I've never chased an F-22. So I never got to fight an F-22. If I did, it would have been in the F-14D. Maybe we did it. No, that was F-15s. No, I've never done an F-22, but good question. On the Tomcast, F-14D pilot Jungle talked about using the IRST alone to detect and triangulate beyond visual range intercepts. Was that widely done, or was the IRS mainly used as a backup supplement for the APG-71? I'll tell you what we used it back then for, David, was the IRS could do what's called raid count for you. So you had on the radar would be up on the center DDI or digital data display, and then on the right-hand side, when you look at that cockpit, we'd have the IRS up there, and it could pick out how many airplanes were or how many heat targets were in the scan. And so when you had both sensors looking in the same place, the radar would give you all the radar mechanics and for the intercepts, and then the IRST would give you what the what the raid count was. And then of course when they got closer, you could see the airplane with the IRST. We did have as we got later tapes in the F-14D, you could do an angular, if you generated enough angular momentum on the IR, which is give you great bearing, you could then generate that triangular difference, and it would give you a recommended range. But at that time, in the D model I was flying at the end of 1998, you had to assess both sensors separately. Hadley, I don't know what redundancy means in your question, so maybe you can write another question. Aeroflip 97, during Desert Storm, did you see what the Tomcat squadrons were missing compared to the F-15s in terms of tactics and tech? Yeah, we missed one thing, and that was the ability to have two ways to identify the bad guy for rules of engagement. The F-14s in Desert Storm did not have two ways in the same airplane to say that's a bad guy. F-15s did, so they could do their own self-determination of hostile. That's what was missing. Mission is purely air-to-air. Does the Navy prefer the E or the F? Both. E and F are equally capable airplanes. There's no preference. Squadrons have E's and F's. They do the mission exactly the same. I will tell you that in a not just air-to-air, and that's when you get away from pure mission. If you are in a very, very heavy jamming environment, very, very heavy ground-to-air threat, surface-to-air threat, very, very heavy air-to-air threat, I'd rather have two people. Shop Talk with Mad Dog. How are aircraft deconflicted in Marshall? 1,000 feet apart. So Marshall at night is 20 feet aft of the carrier on an approach line, and people start at 6,000 feet and go up every 1,000. And when it comes time to push, the first airplane pushes, and every minute from that, airplanes push out of Marshall and fly the pattern down to Marshall. Over the top in a VFR pattern, everybody's 1,000 feet apart, starting from 2,000 feet up vertically right over the carrier, and you do that visually. So you can take a look down at the ship, determine when to go, and you follow the airplanes down below you. And then when the fighters leave 2,000 feet, then the guys at 3,000 drop down, and you follow everybody down. So that's how they're deconflicted. So daytime, no talking, don't have to talk. Hopefully, unless it's a safety call. Nighttime, Marshall or approach is talking to you, and you're pushing out from that pattern. And you're assigned a push time. And so when you check in, for instance, at night, say, hey, Tomcat 1, Marshall Angel 6, and we knew Angels 6 had a specific distance from the carrier, so everybody's 1,000 feet apart and couple miles difference. I can't remember what it was, or maybe it's a mile difference between each one. It's been such a long time since I've flown at night on the carrier. And expected push time 2-2. And then you would read that back, and that's when you would push. If they didn't change it, then at time 2-2, you pushed, like on your watch. And so running that 6-minute pattern and making it work so that you pushed over right at 2-2, that was the precision that was required to give everybody 1 minute apart. John, how was moving from the Tomcat to the Hornet? Was it upsetting leaving the F-14 behind? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love the F-14. But when I left Tomcats in September of 98, and then I got to the Pentagon and then eventually went Navy nuclear power, I didn't think I'd get a chance to fly again. And it dawned on me that I had just got done flying for 16 years in the F-14, and I hadn't stopped to smell the roses. And that was like, oh my gosh. So when I got to fly the F-18, kind of as a hobby, as the skipper of Nimitz and a striker commander, I enjoyed every microsecond. It's like I'd been given a second life. So I loved both. Adam Cotton, I have to ask, have you seen the Top Gun movies? Of course. If so, how would you rate them for realism? So the first movie, they were filming around me when I was in Top Gun in 1985. The movie came out. There is no trophy for best pilot. There is you kind of know who the good pilots are. It's like sports. You know who the good people are, right? You can walk in the bar and you just know, I want to be like that person, that guy, and we didn't walk around going, hey, I'm the best, or you're the best. You just competed, right? And then the camera technology in the first movie required to sort of, we don't maneuver the way they did. Hey, get out of my way. I'm going to shoot the bad guy. But the camera required that. The new movie I thought was awesome, and they put the Tomcat at the end, which is a great surprise for me. The G's is realistic. That's, when you saw in the first movie, Maverick and Goose are flying around like this. That's actually on the ground with them wiggling the cameras, and they're kind of flying around going, okay, Goose, and it doesn't show actually pulling G's. Whereas in the, those are all the back seat of the F-18F that they're flying from. That's real G, and that's that's really what it looks like. Now they were in the back; they weren't actually flying the airplanes. So the pilot in the front of an F is pulling that G, but they're under that G, so that was realistic. And then the flying was pretty good. The only that canyon where they flew, the real mission, that's a real canyon. That's no kidding. We get down and fly in the middle of that canyon. And that's good. That bridge is not there. So the bridge was CGI where they went through the bridge sideways. That's CGI, but the canyon is real. Biggles, yeah, it's just greedy. Absolutely, this is greedy. It's like having a big garage full of sports cars. Richard Thiel, hey Mike, how was the command of the mighty USS Nimitz? Thanks for the wonderful stories. USS Nimitz, the commanding officer of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, is the best job in the galaxy. I could stay there till I died. Timberwolf, could you touch on any red flag combat or otherwise interesting anecdote or two where you had a hairy situation, overcame gnarly odds, or dodged a literal bullet, depending on theater? The only one I ever had in a simulated training is I almost collided head on with another Tomcat. I mean, I don't know how we missed. I still remember going, and that was it. And we went by so close, and I don't know how we missed. That's the only one that really got my attention. Lots of and landing with low fuel and all those kind of things. So I dodged a whole bunch of bullets. I probably outran the number of 9 cat lives that I have, but that's the one that sticks in my head. I almost flew a head on into this guy. Neither of us really knew we were there. I have never flown against an Su-27 or a MiG-29. Never. I've seen a whole bunch of Russian bombers, but I've never gone alongside those. No, I haven't flown Christie alongside of an F-111. Thank God the U.S. Navy did not buy those, and the carrier airplane was the F-14, and you can kind of read about how that all went. Freckle Puny, read about how F-14, F-15 pilots chased down SR-71s in exercises. It was said the USN pilots did pretty well, but there was too much tack and saccharine with the F-15 pilots. Ever hear about this? No, but I will tell you, no, we didn't do well. I'll tell you a story about that. So at Miramar in the 80s, we were on alert. Each squadron had a rotational alert, and when they launched at specific times during the month, it was every day during the month, but it rotated. When they launched an SR-71 out of Beale Air Force Base to come down the Pacific, we got launched as if it was a bad guy airplane. It was practice for them and practice for us. So we'd go out there and roll and get out the end of the runway. Off we'd go, supersonic. We're cleared straight up to go attempt. We get bogey dope, which is the where the SR-71 is. And go to where he's coming and then get underneath him. The idea was to be able to launch a Phoenix at him. And in the Tomcat, that was an F-14As, by the way. And so you're supersonic and you're climbing and you're supersonic, you keep climbing, and you got this guy on your nose, a couple hundred miles away. So we got him on the radar, pretty early in there. We get nose on, and the idea was to make him get into a launch acceptance region, a LAR, L-A-R, launch acceptance region for the Phoenix, and be able to shoot him with a Phoenix as a valid shot. So the box and the LAR would move. It would shrink and grow depending on, where the airplane was in the ability to hit him. And pretty soon, against this one time I went out on a pure blue sky S-71, I got sight of him out there, a little tiny dot. He was white, and those are black airplanes. He was white. So I think it was the heat that caused him to be white. And we had a pretty good, I was zero aspect, kind of coming up going, we're going to get a shot on him. The LAR was really big. And right as I got up pretty high, and now we're going really, really high above where I was supposed to be. and then slowing down quite a bit in the lower one, just shrunk down to nothing. I never got a shot. And so I didn't get a good shot at him. And I'm sure there was tack and sack rivalry with the F-15s, but I can tell you from my case, I had perfect parameters to get up there, and I couldn't shoot him because that thing was going so dang fast. Really funny on the phone debrief, we call up, the crews would call down and go, hey, how did you do? And we tell them about how we did. And, I'd say, well, how fast are you going? He goes, well, let me tell you this. We're off the coast of Southern California, 50, 70, 100 miles out to the west. He goes, when I turned around to go back to Beale Air Force Base and I got all the way around 180 degrees, I was well over the eastern side of Nevada. Okay, so just think about that for a second. So those guys were hauling butt. Have you been in a practice dogfight with any Royal Air Force, and how did you do? No RAF guys. No RAF guys, Martin. I'm trying to think what airplanes out there, Tornadoes and those kind of things. I never got in a practice fight with those guys, but I would have beat them. Collect G1 jackets. Favorite G1? Hey, Navy flight jacket. The one with the fur on the collar, pretty cool. Neuropilot, friend said Commander Fravor, if he says he saw a Tic Tac fly the way it did, then it did. One squared away. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Completely. Yep, Dave Fravor is an awesome pilot and very, very experienced. He knows what he's talking about. Were you part of the exercise Philippines? Tomcats squared off against Eagles, almost had 4 midair. Nope, not that one. I did get to fly in the Philippines. Thanks, Aeroflip. Jarhead, was Biobaronic one of your instructors at Top Gun? No, he wasn't one of my instructors, but he was at Top Gun at the same time I was at Miramar. And I know him extremely well. So we get along real well together with Bio and Nasty. John Minter, what squadrons did you fly in the Tomcat and which squadrons the Super Hornet? So, gosh, Tomcat started out in VF-51, 2 cruises in the Tomcat, F-14A, then went to VF-124 to teach Tomcats, then went back to CAG LSO tour. I flew with VF-213 and VF-114, and then went to VF-1, and then came back and was executive officer and commanding officer of VF-31, and those were all the Tomcat squadrons. Super Hornet aboard Nimitz, VFA-14 and VFA-41, the 2 squadrons there, and then when I was striker commander, VF-103 and VFA-103, VFA-1441 on Nimitz, VFA-103 and VFA-143 with the F-18F and F-18E. Freckle Puny, do you like or appreciate the way 27 and MiG-21 sort of paid homage to F-14's aerodynamic in regard to widely spaced engines? Well, first of all, widely spaced engines, when one of them goes out, gives you huge aerodynamic asymmetry and can be a problem. I think they built them that way, maybe a little bit because they stole a little bit of technology, but Su-27 and MiG-29 can maneuver way better than a Tomcat. And the way the Russians build their airplanes, they put gigantic engines in them so they go really fast. So I would say they're just kind of different, and whether you're flying an F-14 with the engines 9 feet apart or the MiG-29 and Su-27 with the engines wide apart, you get into trouble, slow when one of the engines goes out. So I think it's more of a challenge than it is an homage. Favorite overseas out on the town, larking with dudes, memory of foreign forces, perhaps your own forces too. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that. That's from Timberwolf. I got lots of those. QB Point, Philippines is wonderful to go out to. Marseille, France, Rhodes, Greece. Lots of them doing that. So I can show you Liberty for a fighter pilot and sailor is a really great time. David Smith, GW1, I'm not sure what that is. USAF left the majority of the AA work to the 58 squadron guerrillas and elite squadrons. It makes sense to put elite units at the tip of the spear, better to spread out the workload. Well, it depends on the capabilities of the airplanes. For United States carrier CBWs, if you're going into a high threat air-to-air environment, you put the F-35s downrange because they can get closer and get an ID. They can either take a shot on the ID themselves or send it back through the net to F-18s that can then launch long-range missiles. And so you mix them to get your best combination. And given the capabilities of each airplane that all of our forces fly, you put them in the place that they can give the best contribution to the fight. Right? Think of a soccer team or a football team. Where do you put your strikers? Who's the best midfielder? Who's the best defense? And they all work together to get the mission done. Vic Saney, the USAF has brought back the William Tell air-to-air weapons being in 23. Should the USN do something similar? We then have a naval trophy winner. We already have a naval fighter trophy winner in many different areas. The Air Force has the William Tell specific event. All of Navy missile shots are graded, and it's called a Bula Bula for missiles. And every year, the squadron that does the best in the missile competitions wins the Bula Bula. So we already do that. We just don't do it all at once. Every exercise, every single missile shot is graded in the U.S. Navy. Neuropilot, you hear about F-4s going supersonic head-to-head testing cruise missile intercept. John Wang was one of the test pilots until the CNO told him to knock it off. Do cruise missile intercepts. Yeah, we trained cruise missile intercepts. We didn't train to run into them, but I did a lot of training, and we still train to shoot down missiles as a line of defense if the surface to surface or surface to air cruise missile shots don't work. What aircraft do you like to flown? You never got a chance to. F-15. F-15, 100%. I think the F-15 is God's jet, and Boeing makes F-15EXs now that took the analog F-15. It's like they took a Tomcat A and made it into a Tomcat D, but better. And I'd love to have flown that airplane. The system was missing in Desert Storm, and the F-14 later added on. Yes, it was. The Ds could get their own self-ID, and yes, we could do that. So that version there, it was later added on. How'd you get your nickname Nasty? If you read this book, if you get this book, and it's up in that top right corner, you will know how I got my nickname Nasty, and it was way back in early 1983, and I never did anything different to get it taken away. Freckle Puny, how amazed are you that the Iranians are operating any F-14s right now? I guess reverse engineering can work wonders. I don't know how they do that. We had a hard enough time keeping our F-14s up. They're got to be getting parts from somewhere. I am amazed as well. Yeah. Do you think the Navy missed out on a next generation dedicated strike platform like the A-12 Avenger 2? Well, we do have a next generation. Oh, I see. Dedicated strike. No. All of our aviation assets now need to be multi-mission. If you specialize again, like we used to do, in all the way up until the F-18 Hornet came to us with air-to-air and air-to-ground, now you have to have all of those airplanes. And so I think A-12 became too expensive, and when people considered the value with a single mission, they decided to go somewhere else. So no, I don't think we missed out because we've continued to move on through F-14 into F-18, F-18E and F, and then the F-35C aboard the carrier, and the B with the Marine Corps. So I think that's the way to do it. You ever talk to RAF Tornado F3 guys swap notes? No, I didn't. I didn't, Mike. I know people who have flown the Tornado. I know people who have been exchange pilots in the Tornado. The thing they talked about the most was being down in the weeds and flying that thing. How many combat missions do you have? I actually lost count. I have pages and pages and pages of what's called green ink in my logbook flying over southern Iraq. I can tell you that I never dropped the bomb on anybody, and nobody ever shot at me directly. But I was in the middle of those things during Desert Storm, and actually during Southern Watch and whatever the other one was called in Tomcats. I did not fly any missions at all over bad guy country in an F-18. I did all that off the ship. Managed to fly a pair of F-14s off the Somali coast recently. Oh, okay. Roger that. Oh, you're telling Freckle Puny that, Neuropilot. Heard about the David Smith. I've heard about the difference in culture between East Coast and West Coast F-14 squadrons. What were they each like? How much of a difference do individual squadron commanders make to those cultures? Well, I will tell you that individual squadron commanders make a difference in every squadron. And like any leader of any unit anywhere, that particular leader sets the tone in his or her ready room. So that's really where the culture differences were. But there were kind of ways the East Coast and the West Coast did things. They had different radio. We had a button. It's like button 1 was tower on the East Coast, and button 6 was tower on the West Coast. So radio frequencies were different. Procedures were slightly different. The things you could do around the airfield were slightly different. Like on the East Coast, you come into a diamond break with F-14s. On the West Coast, that was prohibited. And we just kind of, we would of course poo-poo the other coast. The other phenomenon was if you were a East Coast guy, quote, quote, or a West Coast guy, you probably didn't know most people on the other coast. So in that perspective, it is a fairly big Navy. But if you were a West Coast guy and somebody else was a West Coast guy, you probably knew who that person was. What's the training program from Adam Cotton? What's the training program for a Nugget joining the USN these days as a naval aviator? How do they get selected to fly fighters? It's the same. Like I told previous person or previous question, you got to be less than 27 years to get started. You get selected for naval aviation through whatever accession source. You're down in Pensacola, Florida. You go through a medical exam first to make sure you can walk in the door. And then you go through primary or academics first, ground school, and then fly primary flight training in the T6. If you get what's called jet grades, which is above a certain level of Navy standard score, and I can't remember what the number is now, but it's kind of like having a C average versus a A or a B average, in that first part. That's who you selected to go fly jets. And then you go down and fly a T-45 in basic training and then advanced training in the same airplane in either Pensacola, Kingsville, or Meridian, Mississippi. And if you do well in those, then you get selected to fly a fighter. And so that's how it works. It's right now there's a bunch of pools. Optimally, it's about an 18-month process. And now with the pools, it can be almost as many as 4 years. Brian McGrath, in your career, who was the hardest pilot to fly against in ACM? I had a bunch. I had a bunch of people who were fighter pilot mentors of mine. I mentioned a couple. So, Top Gun guys like Rat Willard and Streak Chanick, Bad Bob McCord. You were always, you have a good day. Is he have a good day? How did that fight go? I mean, I literally participated in thousands and thousands and thousands of 1v1 engagements, and there's a bunch of people who were very, very good. I like to think I was a pretty hard guy to shoot down as well. So, Hedge 1011, what was the training you went through to command an aircraft carrier, big ship driver? Seems like an amazing skill set jump. Hey, Hedge, it's relative motion. It's relative motion. So whether you're coming at somebody like this, or you're in your car, or you're on a 100,000-ton ship against a 50,000-ton ship, it's just slower, but it's all relative motion and perspective. So the training I went through to command an aircraft carrier was I went to nuclear power school in Charleston, South Carolina for 6 months of academics, then 4 months of training on an operating power plant up in upstate New York. Then I went to the headquarters for Naval Reactors in Washington, D.C. on the Navy Yard, and I had another 13 weeks of that. So all in all, a year and a half of school. I, of course, was familiar with carriers. I spent 2 years as the executive officer of USS Carl Vinson, where I learned how to, run a ship, the entire thing down and in. And then I learned how to drive the ship from my two captains, Bruce Klingon and Rick Wren. So I would sit in the chair and drive the ship, and they'd go off and do something else. So I did that, knowing always I could call them if I had a problem. Then I was given what's called a deep draft. After that XO ride, I had USS Sacramento, a supply ship, about 600 feet long, 50,000 tons. Learned how to drive a big ship that way, and you just slow everything down, and it's all about momentum. And then by the time I selected for Nimitz, I knew everything I needed to know about driving a carrier. So that's kind of what it takes to do that. And then as an aviator, you kind of know what it takes to land airplanes on that. So actually having a carrier aviator in charge of aircraft carrier is the right thing to do. Timberwolf, where's the most scenic place you ever took the Nimitz? Can crew members fish off the side on downtime if you're not underway? So I had a bunch of scenic places. So going into Hawaii is always really cool. Steaming off the Philippines is always really cool. We're seeing that there. There's such cool things that happen at sea. For instance, when I was actually a pilot on Carl Vinson, my very first tour, we were on the Cats waiting to launch, and everybody was positioned. We were just waiting for the time to go. Completely calm day in the North Arabian Sea, not the Gulf, but the North Arabian Sea. And all the yellow shirts and everybody on deck started pointing off to our right side. I'm on Cat 1, on the right side of the bow, and I look over, and there's about 1,000, maybe 2,000, maybe 10,000 black dolphins that are jumping towards the carrier, and we're steaming this way at about 20, 25 knots, and they're just, the whole horizon is these black dolphins is going, coming. So there was all these things like that. And of course, flying around there is just really cool to see that. So I saw a lot of cool places, but generally it was the islands and, steaming in the Philippine Sea or steaming close to Hawaii. Those were pretty scenic. You can fish, and we did. The problem is that, it's 60 feet to the flight deck, and even if you're on the fantail back there, it's 27 feet down. So you got to get that fish up, 27 feet. And so that's what used to happen is the fish would, they'd fall off. Do you feel the Navy really screwed up choosing to go Super Hornet route over D-model Tomcat fleet, Jarhead 1086? That was a big thing. When I was at Miramar, they were talking about Tomcat 21, and that was late 80s. And we all thought that they should go to, D model. The Tomcat 21 eventually turned into Ds, and then they only bought, enough for 3 squadrons and then got out of it. At that time, I think we made a mistake by not upgrading the Tomcat, but that's the decision the Navy made. Aeroflip 97, how did you manage flying long missions, going back to the boat and doing a normal ship job in terms of mental fatigue? You just learn how to be resilient. You learn how to be resilient. So you get back and you a little bit downtime, cup of coffee, go have a meal. When I was a CO in Nimitz and flying, was striker commander and flying, my missions weren't that long. They were only 45 minutes or an hour long, and I just put them in my routine. But the long missions when I was a Tomcat guy, you just recovered yourself and then kept going. Let's see here. Timberwolf, are civilians allowed in the Top Gun bar? And if so, is there a heavy scrutiny on behavior, just like leaving the phone on the bar in Top Gun Maverick? So you can't go on a base bar, but the Top Gun bar in San Diego, California, you can go to the bar in the first movie Top Gun right on the street. That's a civilian bar. So no, I would say there's not heavy scrutiny. So if you do something like that, like put your phone on the bar, put your wallet on the bar, or wear your hat, everybody plays. We had a person walk into a Navy bar and they had their hat on and they wouldn't pay, so we threw them out. So, have you ever flown with the Blue Angels, Martin Wood? Yep, I got to ride in Cleveland in 1994 in the slot with a guy named Dino Thompson and did the whole show. That was pretty spectacular. And then I flew in the number 7 jet out of El Centro, California, just playing around with a guy named Lawman, who was the Marine number 2. That was also in 1994, 95. Which tanker did you like or hate refueling from the most? And also, is the Hornet easier to refuel than a Tomcat from Freckle Puny? I hated the KC-135. Navy tanking in the 135 is the long boom, a 9-foot hose about that big around in a steel basket. And it's easy to get the probe into the basket. It's really hard to stay in. If you lip that thing and make it come back and if you give it a shot like that with the probe, it'll break your canopy. It can also take off the probe tip. It can also rip off the probe itself. And so that was always the worst, especially at night in southern Iraq when your fuel tapes are about that big and it's bad weather and it's bumpy and your whole life is the knuckle where that hose goes in. So look at a picture of a KC-135 where that 9-foot hose goes in and where it connects to the boom, right where the hose connects to the boom. You got to put a 90-degree kink in that joint, and you did that by putting what's called a C in the hose. So when you look at the tanking of a Navy tanker off a KC-135, you push the hose in until it goes into a C, and then the C would come over the hose and lay on your nose, which is kind of freaky. The Hornet's easier to refuel than a Tomcat because the probe's up in front of you. You can actually look at it. The Tomcat refueling probe was back here, just behind your head. So it would disappear from view as you were just trying to put it into the basket, but you got kind of good at it. El Nock, I do not continue to fly recreationally today. That means I have to put money into flying airplanes, and I put money in boats right now, so that's what I do. Shop Talk with Mad Dog, do you think the lack of organic capability in the air wing to do air-to-air refueling until recently without using Hornets was a mistake. Well, I think the ability, using our top-end fighter to do air-to-air refueling is kind of interesting, but it works. What we're doing is building, along with Boeing, building an MQ-25 Stingray tanker. It's a robot, basically an autonomous refueler to take that mission away from the Hornets and be able to put that capability onto the flight deck. So I don't know if it's a mistake. It's just kind of a plan. So we're changing our plan. Vic saying, if the USMC was able to get the F-14 in the 70s was originally intended, do you think the F-14 would still be in U.S. service today? No, I don't. The Marine Corps was going a different direction. They won F-35s. They would have sold their F-14s and then got F-35s and F-18s. A friend was flying F-15EX for the Pentagon and slicked off. It has a lot of thrust, mature configuration, F-15 Saudi upgrade, and plays nice with other jets like F-35s. What else did you want as a wish list? All of that. It's a great jet. That's God's jet. It has wonderful capabilities and plays with F-35s really nice. I'm a big fan of the special CAG paint schemes from John Minter, the U.S. Navy have. Do you have a particular favorite paint scheme from a jet you flew during your career? Yeah, VF-1, Wolfpack was one of them with that big wolf on it. And then the painted up VF-31 jet. My first cruiser was 100. My second cruise was 200. And so take a look at the VF-31 200, what we call the CAG bird. That's my favorite airplane. Laku, hi Nasty. You're one of my faves along a long list of great guests on the channel. Thank you very much. Can the USN's experience compensate for the logistical nightmare of having to fight in Western Pacific? Well, I'll tell you what, that's a tough fight. First of all, it's called what we call an away game. And second of all, that's a lot of ocean to cover. And when you're having to supply airplanes that are up front that far, it's going to be a real challenge to go do that. So I have great confidence that, if it comes to that we'll have figured that out. I understand the F-14 didn't provide flight controls in the rear seat from Laku again. Was there ever an airframe that did? Yeah, F-18. F-18D had controls back there. If you talk about was there ever an F-14 airframe that did? No, there was never any controls in the back of an F-14. Michael Christensen, the KC-135 basket was called the Iron Maiden. That's correct. My A6 squadron had a pilot refueling off one for his last flight about 10 feet from the basket. Basket fell off the tanker, came back and ripped the refueling probe off and shattered both windscreens. He diverted to San Clemente for emergency landing. I would believe that story. And that happened a lot more than you think. We had airplane, or even that one, we had airplanes recovering on the ship with those kind of things. SPQR-77, have there been any complaints or praises of the Navy F-35C? And any opinion on that model? I think both. So lots of complaints on the F-35C based on maybe it's not fast enough, or maybe it's doesn't carry enough, or maybe it doesn't have, fill in the blank. And then a lot of praises. I've heard great praises from the people that have flown it. VFA 147 is the latest squadron in transition, but the squadrons that have it out on cruise and the air wing commanders and striker commanders that have taken that airplane out say it's pretty badass. And so I think, my opinion of the model, which is the second part of the question, is it's how you combine that capability with everything else that you're fighting with. So whether you're fighting with Navy assets off the carrier, other Navy assets, or joint assets, that's really where the benefit of any airframe comes in. Neuropilot, you think they'll buy more F-18X for the Navy than programmed in currently? If you mean really F-18s, there is no such thing as an F-18X, but I think that the Navy is probably done buying new F-18s. Aeroflip 97, what's your favorite paint scheme from a Tomcat squadron you didn't fly? Well, I flew with the VF-103, which took from VF-84 bounty hunters. I flew the Super Hornet. And if you put that on a Tomcat, that was pretty badass. So the airplanes the Carrier movie where Nimitz was in. Anyway, you guys will know what I'm talking about. But those airplanes. Let's see. Adam Cotton flies a virtual F-14 Tomcat on Microsoft's flight simulator. It seems pretty awesome to me as a former light aircraft pilot, but I really have no idea how realistic it is. Any thoughts? I haven't flown the Microsoft flight simulator, but a lot of the simulations that are out there are really good. But I will tell you that all simulators cannot actually replicate the actual flight capabilities of the airplanes. They just get pretty close. And I had to learn how to fly the F-14 simulators when I was flying F-14, so they're all just really different. Elnock, what's the fastest speed and highest altitude you had a Tomcat to? I went over Mach 2 in a Tomcat, just to say that I did, and the highest I've ever been is 53,600 and some feet. Lucas Franca, how is F-14 sustained instantaneous turn rates compared to today's F-35? I think F-35 is better instantaneous. I'm not sure, it's been way too long, and I haven't looked at F-35 stuff recently. But I think F-14D would be better in sustained just because of our wing. But I didn't give you a good answer because I don't have F-35 experience. David Smith, U.S. Intel officially said Iran got 9 air-to-air kills versus Iraq. Tom Cooper's book, and Iran claims over 150 kills. Without getting into anything classified, where do you think the count will likely lies? I have no idea. I don't know, because I agree. I think people in Iran would say we got that many, and people in Iraq wouldn't come close to that many. And maybe, I would tend to believe U.S. Intel, and if it's declassified and that's the number, that's the one I'd believe. Dieter Schmidt, what's the max speed with the wings fully forward? Well, that's interesting because there is a limit that I can't remember that you can go with the wings fully forward, but when you're operating the aircraft correctly, yeah, final countdown on knock. Thank you, with the VF-84. Max speed, the wings program based on the Central Air Data Computer, so you'd have to have them not programming to then fly. And there was they start programming at 230 knots. So that's not really a good metric to ask about the max speed of the airplane. I don't mean to minimize your question. It's a good question. I just don't know what that number was because they always swept. Timberwolf, opinions on littoral ships such as the Zumwalt, et cetera, have had issues, can be uparmed and repurposed. I got no opinion there. I'm not a surface guy. I'm an airplane guy from Timberwolf. Neuropilot, Iron Maiden basket hit the F-18F canopy bad enough to injure the pilot a few years ago. Yep, I believe that. Dieter Schmidt, could you outmaneuver the Viper in dogfights? Yes, sir, and I did. But mostly they outmaneuvered me. I'll tell you when I did outmaneuver, it was an F-16 just after I'd been in Top Gun. Actually, it was in Top Gun. F-16 being flown, and he got what's called a limiter. So there's a G limiter in the airplane. AOA limiter, angle attack limiter, not a G limiter. In the F-16 there's an AOA limiter, and if the pilot didn't watch what he was doing, he would pull too much AOA for the speed and G he had, and the airplane would stop, and it would just arc. And I was in a fight with it just had reversed, and all of a sudden the airplane just stopped turning and started to arc, and I managed a gunshot on him. But in the debrief later on, he said he had hit the AOA limiter. But a Viper well flown beat every other airplane out there. Martin Wood, what are your thoughts on AI pilotless fighter jets to assist piloted jets, which are being developed for 2035? Yeah, in the F-18F, I did more tasks in the cockpit, and I know they do even more in the F-35 with the plane on autopilot and flying a profile than I did in the Tomcat. And so you're operating the weapon system, you're doing all kind of stuff, having AI helping you out, having a pilot. We're going to get to the point where we're going to have robot wingmans and be able to do that. So we're already moving that direction. It's called manned-unmanned teaming. Frank opinion, would a fixed-wing F-14 as really proposed in one model performed as well as swing-wing? Nope, absolutely not. Couldn't go as fast. So the swept-wing version of a Tomcat, or swept-wing version of any airplane, is that it's optimized wing sweep, 20 degrees forward edge sweep forward to turn and land, and then 68 degrees leading edge sweep to go fast, like a delta wing. So when you have that kind of ability, you're optimizing the two designs. Luis Castro, what was it like flying the only plane could carry the AIM-54? Was it really a good missile? Yeah, absolutely. The missile was over 100 miles, and since I was the only guy that could have I flew an airplane that was the only one to carry a 100-mile missile, felt pretty badass. So pretty cool. I don't see any more questions coming in, Mike. I love them. The questions are awesome. Thanks for the engagement, everybody. I think the Ka-50 would be a good adversary jet. I'm not going to answer that because I work for a company that makes a different adversary jet. So I'm not going to answer that question either way.
Right. Well, I'm going to end that Q&A there. What a brilliant Q&A, Nasty. So thank you very much for coming on. But I've got one question for you. If you were going to fly a US Air Force aircraft, would it literally be the F-15 or would you be tempted with the F-16?
Oh no, F-15. Hey, thanks you guys. It was really cool. F-15. The F-16 is like a sports car and is really cool maneuvering and stuff. But the total capabilities of the F-15 Eagle, especially the EX, it just the overall capabilities are just awesome. And so that's why I call it God's jet. Flying anything like that is just really cool. But yeah, F-15 for sure, God's jet.
Brilliant stuff. So if you can remind our viewers where we can find your book online or your website, that'd be great.
Yeah. So www.MikeManazir.com. It's at the bottom of this right there, MikeManazir.com. And if you go on there, you can get you can buy the book on there. You can get a signed collectible version on there. You get a whole bunch of leadership content. We've got newsletters coming out every week. You can sign up for a newsletter. It's free. They're on leadership stuff. If you want to go buy the book on Amazon, you can buy an e-version, a paperback, and a hardcover on Amazon. We also have them at wholesale locations like Barnes & Noble and Ingram Spark. And so if your company buys books or you get wholesale books, you can look on those outlets. And I did on the Audible and iTunes and stuff, I narrated my own audiobook, so you can get the audiobook as well.
That'll be all linked in the description below. And also go and follow Nasty on Twitter because he puts out some great videos as well. So that'll be linked below. But Nasty, thank you very much for coming on this show. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thanks, Mike. Your show is wonderful. Your audience is brilliant. They have great questions, and they're all wonderful questions. I just wish I had better answers.
Perfect answers. But thank you guys for joining us tonight, and I'm sure we're going to see Nasty in the future. Hopefully, if you're willing to do that, Nasty, I'm sure that will happen in the future. But thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And Nasty, I know you're a busy man, so I'm going to let you go.
Thanks, brother. We'll see you guys.
Cheers.